Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. Once you label me, you negate me. Don't forget to love yourself. Prayer does not change God, but it changes him who prays. To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. Our life always expresses the result of our dominant thoughts. Face the facts of being what you are, for that is what changes what you are. Boredom is the root of all evil, the despairing refusal to be oneself. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. Most men pursue pleasure with such breathless haste that they hurry past it. Be that self which one truly is. Listen to the cry of the woman in labor at the hour of giving birth, look at the dying man's struggle at his last extremity, and then tell me whether something that begins and ends thus could be intended for enjoyment. Purity of heart is to will one thing. The function of prayer is not to influence God, but rather to change the nature of the one who prays. At the bottom of enmity between strangers lies indifference. There is nothing with which every man is so afraid as getting to know how enormously much he is capable of doing and becoming. How absurd men are! They never use the liberties they have, they demand those they do not have. They have freedom of thought, they demand freedom of speech. It is so hard to believe because it is so hard to obey. Life has its own hidden forces which you can only discover by living. There are, as is known, insects that die in the moment of fertilization. So it is with all joy, life's highest, most splendid moment of enjoyment is accompanied by death. The paradox is really the pathos of intellectual life, and just as only great souls are exposed to passions, it is only the great thinker who is exposed to what I call paradoxes, which are nothing else than grandiose thoughts in embryo. During the first period of a man's life, the greatest danger is not to take the risk. One can advise comfortably from a safe port. I feel as if I were a piece in a game of chess, when my opponent says of it, that piece cannot be moved. People commonly travel the world over to see rivers and mountains, new stars, garish birds, freak fish, grotesque breeds of human. They fall into an animal stupor that gapes at existence, and they think they have seen something. Far from idleness being the root of all evil, it is rather the only true good. If I am capable of grasping God objectively, I do not believe, but precisely because I cannot do this I must believe. Since boredom advances and boredom is the root of all evil, no wonder, then, that the world goes backwards, then evil spreads. This can be traced back to the very beginning of the world. The gods were bored, therefore they created human beings. Concepts, like individuals, have their histories and are just as incapable of withstanding the ravages of time as are individuals. But in and through all this they retain a kind of homesickness for the scenes of their childhood. It was completely fruitless to quarrel with the world, whereas the quarrel with oneself was occasionally fruitful and always, she had to admit, interesting. Trouble is the common denominator of living. It is the great equalizer. Not just in commerce but in the world of ideas too, our age is putting on a veritable clearance sale. Everything can be had so dirt cheap that one begins to wonder whether in the end anyone will want to make a bid. I begin with the principle that all men are bores. Surely no one will prove himself so great a bore as to contradict me in this. Because of its tremendous solemnity, death is the light in which great passions, both good and bad, become transparent, no longer limited by outward appearances. Just as in earthly life lovers long for the moment when they are able to breathe forth their love for each other, to let their souls blend in a soft whisper, so the mystic longs for the moment when in prayer he can, as it were, creep into God. The more a man can forget, the greater the number of metamorphoses which his life can undergo, the more he can remember, the more divine his life becomes. Since my earliest childhood a barb of sorrow has lodged in my heart. As long as it stays I am ironic, if it is pulled out I shall die. A man who is a physical being is always turned toward the outside, thinking that his happiness lies outside him, finally turns inward and discovers that the source is within him. It seems essential, in relationships and all tasks, that we concentrate only on what is most significant and important. Take away paradox from the thinker and you have a professor.